What's up, YouTube? Alright, another video. Welcome, welcome, welcome. This one is more about we're going to talk about augmentation evoker. There's not many videos coming out on YouTube or anywhere to talk about like spells and how to play and all that. There's not much on Discord, so I've been playing around with augmentation evoker for quite a bit off stream. Twitch.tv/axie, which I'll be meaning augmentation evoker. But I've just been playing around with it, and I thought I'd show you a guide on pretty much what your rotation would be, and we might even go through an opener. But what I want to do first is talk about the actual spells that augmentation evokers are going to be using, and we're not going to talk about anything in the evoker class tree. We're actually going to be talking about just augmentation itself. So the main thing, the number one priority spell that you have is called Ebon Might. Ebon Might causes the forest nearest allies to you to pretty much gain a flat amount of your stat, which you can see here by 15% for 12 seconds. You can use Eruption, Breath of Eons, and your Empower spells to extend the duration. So the first thing is Eruption. Eruption here is your new Disintegrate. So Disintegrate costs 3 essence, but you can take a Volcazin, this one to reduce it by 1. So pretty much Eruption is your Disintegrate. If you don't know what Disintegrate is, it is a beam that slows targets if you are a Devastation Evoker or Preservation Evoker. Eruption is a little bit different. Eruption is actually an AoE essence spender. So pretty much you press your spender and it'll hit AoE targets, as you can see with these little lines coming through, and it just hits your targets, or AoE. I'm not too sure if there's a cap on it, but I would assume that there potentially is a cap, like reduced from 8 targets below or 5 targets below, it'll do less damage, but it just says between them and nearby enemies. So I'm just going to say if it's like any other AoE spell, it's 8 targets or less will do reduced damage. So by casting Eruption, it increases your Ebon Might by 1 second. If you crit, it will increase the duration by 1.5 seconds. The other spell that you have is called Upheaval. Upheaval is your new Eternity Surge. Eternity Surge is a very nice animation. You go on your wings, wings turn blue, and you shoot out all these like little stars to multiple targets. What Upheaval does, it's pretty much the same thing, but it does a knock up in the air. So I'm going to cast this at maximum rank, and as you can see, the circle gets larger here. And the more targets it hits, the more the first one, I believe the first one gets knocked up, but this will also increase your Ebon Might by 2 seconds. And we'll actually talk about Fire Breath because you'll be talking about using Fire Breath. The exact same thing as all the other aspects of Evoker. Press Fire Breath. The lower ranks put a longer dot. Higher ranks does more upfront damage with a lower dot amount. Both these spells, Fire Breath and Upheaval, increase Ebon Might by 2 seconds. We'll actually skip this spell here and we'll go to Blistering Scales. The Blistering Scales, you put a shield on your target. As you can see, it's on me right now. You put a shield on the target, which is your tank that's going to be taking all the damage. When they get hit, one of the scales explode. You have 15 stacks. One scale explodes, dealing AoE damage to them. So you always want to keep this up on your tank. I reckon this is going to be insane for Mythic Plus. And then the other biggest spell here is, I don't know how to say this, but I call it the crit buff. 12-second cooldown for 24 seconds, so you can use two. You can potentially get 2 of them off at the same time, and you can rotate it between different people. You pretty much pop this on a target. Which button is it? 1. is on the target, they get 3% crit. And if you're talented to anachronism, 33% chance every time you press this spell, you can get a free essence burst. If I press it again, I didn't get it. This is one of the buffs you want to keep up like 100% of the time, or I mean, keep this on cooldown 100% of the time. Well, there's a 33% chance you get an essence burst, and when you get an essence burst, your eruption deals more damage somewhere around here. And then the last spell that you have here is called Time Skip. Time Skip pretty much is an insanely huge cooldown reduction, 1000 for 2 seconds. So what you can do is you can press your Breath of Eons, you press your Upheaval, press your Fire Breath, press your Breath of Eons, which I haven't talked about yet, and then when you press Time Skip, everything just pretty much comes off cooldown, and you can go into a rotation again. This is just to get your cooldowns back up. If there are any particular timings that you need, your cooldowns back up to buff everybody else a nice way. And last but not least is Breath of Eons. We can talk about this, why this is coming off cooldown. What this does is it flies to a target location, puts a debuff called Temporal Wounds on all the enemies in that target. Temporal Wounds accumulate 21% damage of damage dealt by the people that are affected with your Ebonite, and then at the end it will critically strike for that amount of damage for arcane damage. What it will also do, it will apply Ebonite to a couple of people for 5 seconds. So, this is your big main DPS cooldown, which what you want to do is, you want to say in AoE situation, you want to use your Breath of Eons, get the dot up, and then pretty much empower them or keep the buff running with Ebonite. And then after a few seconds, it does huge damage. Alright, so Breath of Eons is coming off cooldown. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to do just something very simple. We're going to cast Ebonite into Breath of Eons on the targets, get those out. And then they should be getting damaged by, there's not many people. And then at the end, I'm not going to do any damage. Everything should crit. The more damage those people do, the more damage it's going to explode afterwards. So that's pretty much what Breath of Eons. That's your major cooldown. And then again, if that's on cooldown, you can press your Time Skip to get 1000% cooldown reduction. So that is the basic spells that you're going to be using as an augmentation evoker. So one thing I forgot to mention is that Ebonite just doesn't put the stat buff. It also empowers your eruption damage. So we just do a normal eruption here. You can see it does, like, I think 11 or 12k. You press Ebonite into eruption, and it does 15k. So 11k to 15k. So you want to always save your essences for after you press Ebonite, and also after you press Upheaval. Because every time you press Eruption, which is your spending ability, I'm going to go back here. Every time you press Eruption, 1 second of Upheaval, like you get 1 second cooldown of Upheaval. Let's say I do this, Ebonite into Upheaval, that's 40-second cooldown. You spam this, boom, 1 second down, 1 second down, 1 second down. So you always want to spend as much essence into, or spend as many eruptions as you can after you've pressed Upheaval, because you want this to come back off cooldown to make this time with Ebonite, which is 30 seconds. This should come to, like, depends how many you're able to cast, it should sync up, or you might get to like 32 seconds. So Ebonite into Upheaval, pretty much you have 12 seconds, we'll get it to 14 seconds. Every time that you press your eruption is an extra 1 second, or 1.5 if you crit. So you're always press Ebon Mine upheaval into your essences. Never eruption, never spend your essences without pressing either Ebon Mine or upheaval. Or if you have like less time, you want to be like pulling your essences so you can be increasing your Ebon Mine. So opener. Your opener actually starts like 15 seconds. You could even do 14 seconds. Anything above 12 seconds, you want to be you starting everything. You can start at 13 seconds, start at 14 seconds. Prefer around 14, 14 to 13. Why? Because this buff, I'm going to go back into it. The crit buff lasts for 24 seconds, so it's double the time. And it's on the 12-second cooldown. So on pull at 13 seconds to 14 seconds, it doesn't really matter because the first target that you give it to will have on pull about 9 seconds left of free crit. And then the next person at 1 second, you can use the buff again, we'll get the full 23 or full 23-ish seconds. Your rotation starts at 13 to 14 seconds because you're wanting to buff this. And also by running anachronism, you have a 33% chance to get a free essence burst. So at 13 seconds, you cast your crit buff. Actually, do I have a pull timer? You can't pull timer here. So you do that. In between, you set up your blistering scales on your tank. And you can tip the scales if you wish. And then your crit buff comes off cooldown, you press it again. In this case, we didn't get any essence burst procs, which is okay. And then on pull, you pop your spoils or your trinket or whatever. You press your last. You can press Ebon Might into Eruption, into rank 1 Fire Breath, into your Breath of Eons. You can come back and then you start spamming your Eruption. And then you proceed, your crit comes off cooldown, just keep spamming. And here, if you wish, you can press your time skip for everything to come off cooldown, upheaval, you can refresh your Ebon Might, keep this running. It comes off cooldown, press your crit buff, and that's pretty much it. You fill her in Living Flame with everything. It's quite simple. So what you want to do is, this is coming off cooldown, upheaval. We do not have Ebon Might up for a little bit. We can spend that, wait for the crit buff to come up, press the crit buff into Ebon Might, rank 1 upheaval, rank 1 fire breath, and just spend. And also don't forget, if your blistering scales drops off your tank, just rebuff the tank. And that's pretty much it. It's actually quite simple. It's actually quite simple. Maintaining your Ebon Might is 100% the go. I don't really like to run time skip. I prefer to run Interwoven Threads, but I think both will have a different use in Raid or even in Mythic Plus, where if you click Interwoven Threads, your cooldown spells are just decreased by 10%. So this becomes 27 seconds, this becomes 36, I think, and this becomes 27. So more cooldown on Ebon Might. Don't have to pressure time skip every 3 minutes. Like for Mythic Plus, this is going to be probably the best. This becomes like 11 seconds, and also Breath of Eons becomes 1.6, 1.7 or something like that. So Interwoven Threads is probably going to be easier to maintain because you won't have another button to press. But that's Augmentation Evoker. So what I've done, I've actually just swapped over to Interwoven Threads, like I just mentioned previous. You see it's 27 seconds, 36 seconds, 27 seconds, 1.8, not 1.6. Oops, maths is bad. So you get this buff quickly, and then even the crit buff starts at 11 seconds, so you can actually start at 12 seconds. So, like I mentioned, before pool, you want to put your crit buff on, anybody, or your 2 targets. Just wait, and then once it's starting to go to it, cooldown, you got 2 seconds. You put the second crit buff on, cast Living Flame, last, but my last is off cooldown, Pressure Trinket, Ebon Might, Eruption, Rank on Fire Breath, Breath of Eons. Where's my buttons? Breath of Eons. Oops, I went all the way back. And just spam eruptions. Don't forget your crit buff. If you don't have anyone targeted, you will just put it to the person nearest to you. And then you have your new Ebon Might coming up. Your crit buff, you can go into Ebon Might, Upheaval. And you just keep your Ebon Might rolling as much as you can here. Don't forget your crit buff. I could have just casted that eruption. And that's pretty much Augmentation Evoker. It's quite a more simplistic as what people can think of. I think this is a great spec for raid leaders, because raid leading, you can do a lot of things. You don't have to pay attention like getting your DPS down completely correct, but just by maintaining Ebon Might as long as possible, you're not going to get 100% on uptime on Ebon Might, right? You're not going to get 100% on Ebon Might, but you're going to get pretty much like 80%. 80% uptime on Ebon Might, or even higher, is going to be very, very good. We just don't get any buffs, and the Ebon Might's running out. And then now we hold, wait until these come off cooldown, get your crit buff, Ebon Might. You can go tip of the scales, get that running. Wouldn't ever tip of the scales fire breath at all. That's just cringe. And then this is coming off cooldown. Depends on where the raid is at the moment. You can pressure Ebon Breath of Eons again. Get your buff back up. But yeah, pretty simple. If you enjoy this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, do all that kind of jazz. Might be talking about some survival stuff very shortly, because the T catalyst is coming out, so I should be able to get some 4-set action happening. But I'll be talking a lot still about Augmentation Evoker. But till then, guys, appreciate y'all. Catch you on the flip side.